Good morning, everyone. I will begin my class today. This is to prepare you for the next module. At the same time, you will be asked to also prepare for your midterm. So for the announcement, I have already gave you the announcement yesterday. So I'm sharing to you my screen, and I will bring you to the announcement that I have. Okay, so at least you have to be aware of the schedules that we will have beginning today. So I moved the meeting today so that you have time to look at our schedules ahead. Your midterm is scheduled on Thursday. That is July 1st. And the midterm will be until July 4th. So there is a link that you can find for the midterm in week 5 completion marker. Okay, so just look for that completion marker named midterm exam. Now, before the midterm exam, I am opening the quiz reviewers. Since midterm includes quiz 1, that is from module 1, and quiz 2 from module 2, which you have just completed last night. Okay, now you have here in number 7 item in the resources. The reviewer starts today, so you can go back to the previous quizzes we have. Now, this is only available until Wednesday. That means before the midterm exam. During the exam proper, you cannot find this reviewer anymore. So you cannot open this link. Okay, so A and B are the 2 previous quizzes that we had. Now, how many questions will I get from here? Perhaps I will get 15 questions from quiz 1 and another 15 questions from quiz 2. Where will be the 20 questions for the midterm? So the midterm exam will be coming from Introduction to Epistemology. So letter C in the resources number 7 will be your guide for the 20 questions. These are the new questions that you will learn. Okay, now I'll be opening number 8 today. Okay, and there are 2 things in this mastery reviewer number 8. Midterm and quiz 3. Never mind with quiz 3, this will be the items that you will prepare next week. But don't worry about that for this week. What you will worry is the midterm section. Now, letter C and mastery reviewer for midterm will be important for you within the next 3 days for your review. So I need you to review for the midterm first. Okay, now what is the PowerPoint? So this is the PowerPoint that I want you to look at. Let's see if I can have it available now. Okay, it's still downloading. Okay, so I'm opening the file. All right. Okay. By the way, I wish to welcome Bradley, John Paul, and Kiana. Thank you for coming. So I started at 11 o'clock and I recorded this for the class. Okay. So in case you have some concerns, you can raise your hand and try to um, let everybody know your concern, and I would like to answer them. Okay, so the PowerPoint is opening, and this is the PowerPoint that you will use to prepare for the midterm. Just give me some sort of time for this, okay? I don't know why it's so slow right now. Perhaps because I am downloading some recording from our previous sessions, okay? From Collaborate. I am downloading them to have it in my file. Let me see. There is okay. All right. Now, the first thing that I need you to look at for your midterm is this. So I need you to, right? So you may be seeing Introduction to Epistemology. So this will be the file that you will study for your midterm exam. Now, what are the terms that I need you to consider looking at, okay? Now, of course, terminologies. There are terms that I need you to understand. Okay, so the definition, so like for instance, the meaning of epistemology. So this is one. And epistemology, it says here, is a theory of knowledge. Okay, now knowledge here must be understood as justified truth claim. Now, what is justified truth claim? So I will type that one here. Okay, now when you say justified, there are three elements here. So there must be a claim. That's the first element. The second element is the claim must be considered true. And the third element is there must be a warrant. That means justified. It has evidence. So when you claim something like that Joe is a gay, that's a claim. Now, when you will be asked, is it true? You may say it's true, but when you will be asked, can you support your claim that you believe is true, that Joe is a gay? Then if you cannot prove it, then it loses the idea of knowledge, because you may have a truth claim that has no evidence. Then that is not knowledge. So there is one section in our PowerPoint that speaks of that. I think box number 17. Okay, box number 17 explain the meaning of knowledge as justified truth claim. So the first element is there must be a claim or a belief. The second element, what you believe as or what you claim must be true. And number three element, what you said as true must have an evidence. So in the absence of evidence, it will become an opinion. And epistemology is not about opinion, it's about truth, belief that is justified, which is called knowledge. So A, B, and C must be there for it to be knowledge. So in the absence of sufficient evidence, it can only be claimed as opinion. Okay, so that's very important part of your learning here, the definition of epistemology. Now, there are two important theories of epistemology. One theory is empiricism, okay? The other theory is rationalism. Now, what's the difference on these two? Now, empiricism uses experience as the source of knowledge. Okay? So you must mark that, the word experience. And how do we experience technically? We experience through our senses. Suppose I see something, I hear something, I touch something, then I say, oh, I know what it is because I see it, I experience it. Now, that belongs to empiricism. I know something because of experience. Now, rationalism is different. We know something because of reason, because of the intellect. Okay, suppose my mind thinks of something and you say, oh, I know because I am thinking of it. We use our intellect in thinking. Knowledge can come from the mind. Now, is it true when you say knowledge comes from the mind? Of course. We also say it's true, like 2 plus 2 equals 4. How do you know that 2 plus 2 is 4? That's intellectual, something we know from reason. Okay, now can you show me 2 plus 2? Where should I experience 2 plus 2? So before my experience of numbers, 2 plus 2 has been there. I was just taught about 2 plus 2. I don't even need to experience it because reason tells me that it is true. Okay? Now, so something called ideas that may be already in the mind before we know it. Okay, I have one section in slide number 5 about empiricism. Okay, so mark this. This will be how empiricists should be understood, or empiricism should be understood. Okay, first, how do they look at the mind? For the empiricist, our mind has nothing on it since birth. We call this one tabula rasa. And therefore, we don't have any idea in the mind until we start to experience something. So we have an empty mind when we were born. That's how the empiricists believe. We have so many empiricist philosophers like John Locke, like Hume. Okay, so we will discuss that one next week. Okay, during our journal. So we will discover their philosophy. Okay, so as they thought that knowledge comes from experience, they also see the mind as something empty. That's why before our experience, there was nothing in the mind. So they call knowledge as a posteriori. And what is the meaning of a posteriori? That means knowledge after experience. So I know something only after experience, and we don't have anything in the mind until we experience through our senses. So what is the source of knowledge, or a gateway to knowledge? We call this senses. So our senses is the gateway to knowledge. Without the senses, we don't know anything. Okay, now the empiricists usually employ inductive method. And what is an inductive method? It's a method using particular observation in order to draw a conclusion. We investigate things through experience one by one, individually, and from those individual results, then we come up with a conclusion. So that's how scientists do in finding their conclusion or generalization. They use inductive method. Now, what about the rationalist? The rationalist has a different perspective. Okay, the rationalists believe that the mind has something on it even before we experience. We call this one, we have some innate ideas already. Okay, now the ideas of numbers, the ideas of letters, figures, distance. Now, just like Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, says, we have already some categories of understanding built in since birth. We did not choose to have them. Every person born has it already. Now, what kind of knowledge do they have? So the rationalist believes that knowledge is a priori, which means independent of experience. That means independent from any experience, we know something already, like numbers. Even we don't experience numbers, we have that as the truth of the mind. So reason is the gateway. That is the way in which we know. Now compare it with empiricism. The senses is the gateway to knowledge. The rationalists had reason as the gateway to knowledge. Now, they employ deductive method. Now, if you are familiar with deductive method, the mind can deduce something from the general principle and apply that to any um, individual things, or they deduce from the theory and apply that to a particular situation. I'll give you an example of that, like gravity. Now, do you need to experiment that everything that I throw upward goes down? By deductive method, the rationalist would say it is always true, so long as I am in the sphere of the earth. Do I need to jump from the building to prove that to be true? I can deduce by thinking. I can think that it could happen, that I don't need to throw my phone to prove that it's true that anything I throw upward goes down. It will happen. Deductively, I can apply the general principle to any particular situation. Rationalists would think that way. Okay, so these are concepts that are important that we have learned in the vocabulary. Okay, now there is one epistemological position that we have to learn. We call this one skepticism. When can skepticism happens? Another word for skepticism is suspension of judgment. Okay, a person who is a skeptic do not make a judgment at the moment. Why? Because they are still in doubt. When I am in doubt, I will not make judgment. And that is very important in knowing. Suppose I am not so sure what it is. I cannot just say anything about it, but I will say I cannot say something right now. I have to investigate. I cannot tell you what it is. So it's a moment to reflect. It's a moment to consider. It's a moment to examine. Now, the problem is I become a skeptic because of the absence of evidence. If there is nothing to inform me about it, then I will remain as a skeptic. So skepticism is very healthy position in epistemology. We need to have skepticism, especially I'm doing research right now to finish my doctorate. So when my advisor says, I think this conclusion, Joe, is not true, you have to read more about on this section. Now you cannot make that conclusion right now. Now, I should have not said something about it. I should be skeptical about saying something about it, because of the lack of evidence. We call this skepticism. There is one section that I developed on skepticism. It's in box number 7. It says here, so skepticism is a suspension of judgment. It is a very important word. Now, the Greek origin of this is skeptomai. Now, when you say skeptomai, the literal meaning from the Greek word is reflect, consider, or examine. I'll just give you an example. Say you're a lady or a woman. Someone is courting you, and the guy whom you know is not so familiar yet. So what you should do? So perhaps you will not just accept any proposal and say, I'm so sorry, I cannot make any decision right now. I have to reflect about it. I have to consider your love for me. I have to consider my parents. I have to examine who you are. And so it's a very useful thing to suspend any judgment. So we call this one skepticism. Now, there are 3 types of skepticism. These are very important types of skepticism that is available here. One is common sense. Now, from the word common sense, this is a healthy kind of skepticism that we have to face every day. Wherever we are, whatever you do, while you are driving, you are eating, you are taking a bath, while you are cleaning, common sense doubt is necessary. For instance, as you eat something, say in the restaurant, and you found something in the food that is being served, say a piece of hair, or there seems to be an insect in the food, okay? Well, by common sense, you will say, what is this? It seems the food is dirty, and you are not comfortable with it. So you may complain and say, I'm so sorry, I cannot eat this. This is dirty. Because if you give to anybody in that restaurant, they may as well not eat it. By common sense, everybody must doubt it. Now, that is what common sense is. You should be doubting everybody's, say, when you're driving, every driver in the road can be object of doubt. Are you sure that that person beside you can see you? Will you change lane if you are not so sure about the cars behind you? Is it running on the same speed as you do? Or is it not changing lane as well? Those are things that you should consider by common sense, okay? Now, there are many things that common sense is demanded, and skepticism is important there. We don't worry about that in epistemology. We practice common sense every single day, okay? Now, the second type is methodical. Now, from the word method, philosophers, scientists use doubt as a method in order to test something for accuracy. Okay, now I'm doing my dissertation, as I said. I am using methodical skepticism. In other words, researchers do not draw conclusion unless they are certain. Now, they are not saying that they will not make conclusion. Now, as part of their method, they will use skepticism at the moment, okay? Now, the third type is called absolute skepticism. There was a guy named Pyrrho of Elis, is like before Christianity, 300 BC, who said that everything is doubtful. Now, he started this absolute skepticism. But there are so many oppositions about this kind of skepticism, saying that this kind of skepticism is self-contradictory. Why? Because when you say everything is doubtful, that includes that statement as well, because that belongs to everything, and therefore it is illogical to follow this kind of skepticism. So as a philosopher, we should not use absolute skepticism as a healthy type, because this kind of skepticism contradicts your own statement. Okay? So one thing that you have to learn is the methodical, because we are in philosophy. Okay, what else that we need to learn? Two kinds of proposition. Slide number 3 and slide number 4. Okay, now slide number 3 speaks about the word analytic proposition. We call this a self-evident knowledge. This kind of knowledge, when you say self-evident, is always true knowledge, or is a true statement. It is always true by definition. Now, I'll give you an example of this analytic proposition. All fat cats are fat. 2 plus 2 is 4. Biology is a study of life. Now, from these examples, if you look at these examples, okay, why is this analytic? So analytic, I just type it here, and this is called self-evident, precisely because the subject belongs to the predicate, or vice versa. And what does that mean? Okay, so if you examine all fat cats are fat, this is the subject, and the subject is fat cat, and the predicate is fat, are fat. Okay, so I will put, say, purple color here. So the subject says here belongs to the predicate. Fat and fat, you got these two words already in the subject, also, and in the predicate. Okay? Now, if it is only all cats are fat, then this is not analytic. Because of the word fat, then this is always a true statement. Call this self-evident. Now, another example. 2 plus 2. Now, 2 plus 2 and the predicate 4 is the same. Okay? Now, why the same? Because 2 plus 2 is also 4. So it belongs to each other. Now, the word biology is the subject, and the word biology means a study of life. So it's one and the same. And this is called self-evident. So what are the characteristics? So try to remember these 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The subject and predicate are one and the same. It is always true by definition. And so once this is true by definition, you don't need to verify that. 2 plus 2 is 4. There is no need for verification. And there cannot have a contradiction. What does that mean? It is impossible for you to say all fat cats are not fat. You cannot. This cannot happen. You cannot put this as a statement. All fat cats are fat. Like 2 plus 2 is not 4. It is impossible to say that. Or biology is not a study of life. That cannot be. And so there is no possible contradiction, And so you can only say 2 plus 2 is 4. All fat cats are fat. Biology is a study of life. Okay, so in conclusion, when you say self-evident, this must always be true. You don't need to verify it. Okay? Now, the opposite kind of proposition is the synthetic. Now, let us remember the analytic that we discussed earlier. While synthetic is different because this time the truthfulness is in verification. So remember the word verification. So synthetic and the word verification goes together. In the word analytic, the word self-evident also comes with it. Synthetic means verification. It demands verification. I'll give you an example of that before you understand it. So compare it with analytic. In the synthetic statement, the example says the candy is sweet. Mary is beautiful. The janitor is honest. Now, all these statements here, okay, look at the subject. This is the subject. And look at the predicate. This subject and predicate do not belong to each other. Okay, now compare it with, say, all fat cats are fat. I will put this one here. All fat cats are fat. So if you compare this, these are two different statements. One is analytic. Why analytic? Because the subject and predicate belong to each other. The candy is sweet. The subject, candy, and sweet do not belong to each other. How to analyze that? Not all sweet things are candy. Not all candies are sweet. Remember that. And therefore, this is synthetic. Now, how do we know that the candy is sweet? How do we know that the candy is sweet? Now, the answer is by tasting it. In other words, verification. Without verifying that the candy is sweet, then I cannot tell that the candy is sweet. So if I have no way to taste it, suppose, guys, look at what I'm eating right now. I'm eating candy. And you will say, oh, is that sweet, sir? Yes, it's sweet. Can you say, yes, sir, the candy is sweet? How did you know it? I'm just thinking about it. Now, it cannot happen like that. You need to taste and eat what I'm eating for you to say that the candy is sweet. So the truthfulness lies in verification. Now, another thing, Mary is beautiful. How do we know that Mary is beautiful? By seeing Mary, by looking at Mary. And we call this as well as verification. Without seeing Mary, can you say that Mary is beautiful? Whose Mary was it? It's the name of my wife. Have you seen my wife? You have not seen my wife. And so you need to see the picture of my wife, or you need to see my wife's personal life so that you will conclude that Mary is beautiful. Okay, another thing. The janitor is honest. How do you know that the janitor is honest? Of course, by observing the janitor. Without observing the janitor, then you cannot draw conclusion. So we call this one a verification. So if you compare with analytic, you don't need to verify all fat cats are fat. This is always true. This is always true. 2 plus 2 is 4 is always true. Biology is a study of life. It's always true. Now, in synthetic, the candy is sweet. How do you know it's true? Of course, I cannot tell right now unless I taste the candy. So the truthfulness is in tasting it, seeing it, observing it. We call this one verification. So there are 4 characteristics of synthetic proposition. Look at the subject and look at the predicate. They are not one and the same. That means they don't include each other. Say candy and sweet, merry and beautiful. Not all beautiful things are merry, or not all merries are beautiful. Okay, janitor doesn't mean honest. Honest doesn't mean janitor. And so it's not necessarily true by definition. Compared to analytic, it is always true by definition, while synthetic is not always true. And the truthfulness lies in verification. You need to verify it for it to be true. And remember this, there is possible contradiction after you observe it. Suppose you ate the candy, you taste the candy. So you can also say, possibly you can say, the candy is not sweet. That is one possibility as well. Now, in the 2 plus 2 equals 4, there is no other possibility. That is always true. You cannot say 2 plus 2 is not 4. But here, after tasting the candy may not be sweet. Or after seeing Mary, you will say Mary is not beautiful. After observing the janitor, you can also say that the janitor is not honest. Okay, so these are terms that I need you to consider learning as you prepare the midterm. There is a word here, unless you have some questions, by the way, because this is a recorded stuff. So for others to review this, I need just to go through this PowerPoint quickly. Okay, now if this page comes out in the test, most probably the question is, why is epistemology a modern problematic? Now, the word modern problematic is that epistemology is a reaction to the medieval dogmatism in understanding the truth. Okay, and so there was a time that the church has been the source of truth during the medieval period. And so when the modern period comes out, it tries to object how they believe as true. So the medieval church would say that the authority of the church is the source of truth, their dogma is the source of truth, and therefore you should only listen and accept it. Now, epistemology says no, we cannot just listen, we cannot just accept what is given to us. We should be critical because each one has a mind, each one can know the truth, each one can find the truth, not just a recipient of truth. So we call this one the upheaval in the modern thought. It started with Descartes in the 16th century. Now, when is the dogmatic medieval period? From the 3rd century at the beginning of the church until the 14th century during the time of Aquinas, 11th to 14th century during the height of that medieval dogmatism, the height of the power of the church as well. So there's so much an issue about who has the truth, because the church claims they have the truth. And so at the 16th century, Descartes would say every person is equipped with the capacity to find the truth. And so modern problematic, part of the modern period to discover the truth. Okay. Now, there is an etymological meaning of epistemology. Okay, the two Greek words. And what are these two Greek words? One is episteme, and the other one is logos. Now, try to remember these two words wherein we derive the word epistemology. Episteme means knowledge, logos means study, and so epistemology is study of knowledge or a theory of knowledge. And it's not about doxa, which means opinion. Okay? Now, there is a working definition. I always tell this as a working definition, how epistemology is looked at by philosophers as a branch of philosophy. Now, today we study epistemology as a branch of philosophy, which tries to understand the nature of our capacity of knowing. Remember that every person is capable of knowing, and every person has this capacity to know. We just want to know and understand this capacity. And that is what epistemology tries to study along the way. Okay? Try to know also the non-question in epistemology, and we call this, do we know? Now, why? Because in asking the question, do we know, we are doubting our capacity. Remember, in the given definition, we are already being assumed as something that has capacity to know. So we should not doubt that capacity. In asking a question, do we know, we are doubting that capacity, and so epistemological philosophers put that as a bad sign and say we should not ask that question in our study in epistemology. So what is the right question then in epistemology? How is knowing possible? That is the good one. Okay? What is meant by knowing? Okay? Or what are the conditions that I need to know when I speak about knowing? So those are things that I need to ask rather than the question, do we know? Okay? Now, there are four senses of to know. I need you to focus on this. If this comes out in the test, it's very easy to remember. The first sense is familiarity, when we are aware of, when we experience of something directly. So familiarity, suppose you say, I have a personal knowledge about Alvin Community College. Now, because you are studying at Alvin College, so you're familiar with the place. And familiarity implies that you know something with direct experience. Now, you can also say, I know something even without direct experience. Okay, so the word direct is important here. So I have to say contact, and here without direct contact. Now, when you say I'm aware about President Biden, so I could say I know President Biden by awareness. I have not met that president, that person, but I know he exists. Even without direct contact, I would say I know President Biden, but the meaning is awareness. What if I have direct experience? Then you say, I know President Biden by familiarity, when you have direct contact with him. Okay, like for instance, I come from the Philippines. Suppose I will say to you, I know Philippines. Now, for me, it is by familiarity. Because you have no direct experience of that country, then you will say, I know Philippines by virtue of awareness. Okay, so we use the word know to mean one, familiarity, and two, it means awareness. There's also another one, is a skill. So say, I know how to drive, I know how to cook, I know how to sing. We still use the word know to refer to skills. Now, the last kind of to know is to know that. Now, this is the assertion part. We assert something as true or not true. Suppose I say, I know that Joe is a gay. So you say you should be giving that example as a proposition. And when you propose something, you must have an evidence for someone to make a judgment and say, oh, really? Is it true? Okay. So a proposition is an assertion for it to be true or not. And it invites for a judgment. And this is what is epistemology, epistemological. And epistemological means there is a truth value in it. There's a truth value. When you say truth value, something that you can claim as true or not, and it invites me for a judgment. And what is a judgment? Judgment is the act of accepting or denying a proposition or a to know that. Proposition is something I claim as true. Now, when I make a judgment, either I affirm as true or I deny it. Okay? And so before you claim as true, there must be a justification. Because without a justification, you may be saying only an opinion, and it's not knowledge. And that is very important word. Call it judgment. And there are three elements of that I mentioned earlier. There's a belief. The belief is true, and there must be evidence. So what is an evidence? An evidence is something you see from a distance. So there is a Latin word called videre. Now, videre, to see, okay, which is the videre. Means arising from. So it's arising from seeing. So evidence is what is clear and manifested, arising from what is seen. So if you cannot see anything, then it cannot be an evidence. Suppose someone says in the court, Your Honor, I have an evidence here against that guy in the front. And the judge will say, can you show that here in the court? And the guy who says, I have evidence, said, this is secret, sir. Now, is the secret thing an evidence? Now, based on the definition of evidence, it must be seen from a distance, arising from seeing. If you cannot see it, then it cannot be an evidence. Now, no wonder if you present something as an evidence in the court will say, we will examine that evidence, we will make it like an exhibit, we will keep that as the property of this court, and no one should demolish that evidence. Now, if you do demolish that evidence, then you obstruct justice. You will be perhaps accused of perhaps delaying justice and also destruction of evidence. And it's a crime to do that as well. Okay, so evidence is a very important word in epistemology, because in the absence of evidence, you cannot move forward to show your truth or claim. Okay, now this is one word that I need you to understand. What Aristotle said as the traditional meaning of truth. Okay, what is truth for Aristotle? Aristotle said a proposition is true if of what is the case, it says it is the case. Or if what is not the case, it's not the case. Now, there seems to be a play of language here, but simply is this: what is the case? It is the case. Okay? What is not the case? It is not. Now, if you think that this explains what is true, Aristotle had this in mind during this time in, say, the 3rd century, for instance. What is the case? It is the case. Okay? Now, I don't know if you have an experience or an example of this. When I ask my students, what are these words? This seems not to pick this one up and say, oh, it's hard to explain, sir. But Aristotle was just saying, look at the object. Look at the object. Okay, so I'll show you something. Say, Kiana Broadley, you are in the class today. Now, what are you seeing in my hand? What am I holding? What am I holding in my hand? An eraser. Okay, so this is the case of an eraser. So look at this object. And so this is the case of an eraser. So what shall I say to be in truth, Bradley? What will I say about this? What will I say about this, Kiana? What will I say about this object? Suppose I will make a statement and I'll be in truth. Will you just say it's black or gray? What is this object about? Okay, so we say, I am holding an eraser in my hand. So it is an eraser. If I say that this is an eraser, am I in truth? Yes. So what is truth for Aristotle? Traditionally, he says, look at the case of the object. And what is the case? Say it. And say that is an eraser or this is an eraser. Suppose I give you another example. What am I holding in my hand? What is the case of this? There is also an eraser on top, and there's like a stick colored yellow. Oh, a pencil. So what will I say to make a statement that speaks also of truth, that I'll be in truth? What will I say? That this is what? This is a pencil. Therefore, I am in truth when I say this is a pencil. What about this? What are you seeing? What is the case of this? So there's a pointy here. I can write in my hand. And so this is a pen. So this is a case of a pen. So when a person says, sir, that is a pen, therefore you are telling the truth. Because what is the case, you have to say it. What is the case? It's a very simple thing for Aristotle to define truth. So last two example. What is this case? What is this case I'm holding? This is what? A marker or expo marker. So you are saying that this is the case of a marker, therefore that is true. Your statement is true. Okay, what if I will use the second statement? What is not the case? It is not the case. Okay, so let's go back to my previous example. Okay, how will you say that still true using the second line of the statement? What is not the case? it is not the case. You are still in truth, but you claim something and say a statement to prove you are also in truth about this thing. What will you say? That you are also in truth. That's harder, right? Oh, Bradley says that is not a marker. Good. That is also true. Okay, this is not a pencil. I'm also in truth. This is not a pen. I am also in truth. So Aristotle is saying simply, what is not the case? You say it, it's not the case. Suppose I am speaking about myself. Okay, about my person. Using the first line, what is the case? It is the case. What will I say to myself? I am a man or I am a woman? Which one is right to tell about my case? Of course, you say, I have to say, I am a man. Therefore, I'm saying my case. So, what about using the second line there about myself? What will you say? Oh, I am not a woman. Very good. That is what truth for Aristotle. To say, I'm not a woman, I'm also in truth. I am a man. I am also in truth. So in other words, these things are very important thing to note, to review for your epistemological positions. Okay? Now, what I explain here belong to your vocabulary. Let's look at your vocabulary assignment. Look at your vocabulary here. Now, your vocabulary, I already explained everything. So etymological definition, all right? Episteme, logos, remember that? Characteristics of empiricism, remember the four? Characteristics of rationalism, remember the four? What are the kinds of skepticism? I explained that. What is methodical skepticism? I explained that. What's the difference between a priori versus a posteriori? What are the characteristics of analytic proposition? I explained that. What are the characteristics of synthetic propositions? I explained that. What are the elements of knowledge, the justified truth belief, and the classical definition of truth by Aristotle? In other words, we have answered the vocabulary. At the same time, I have also answered your midterm preparation. Now, what are those midterm preparations? So when you go to your announcement, there is a mastery reviewer here. And when you open the mastery reviewer, that's the same thing I had already explained earlier. There are two parts of this. Okay. Now, here I already explained everything. Okay. So, epistemology in the etymological meaning. What is empiricism? Okay. What is rationalism? Okay. What is skepticism? Common sense, methodical, absolute. What is analytic proposition? Okay, what is a synthetic proposition? And then you have the meaning of epistemology, the working definition. It's very important. As modern problematic that I mentioned earlier. The fundamental question of epistemology is what is knowledge versus opinion. The non-question is, do we know I already mentioned that. The right questions are the following: the four senses of to know: familiarity, awareness, skill, okay? And the last one is to know that, okay? And then what is proposition? There are three elements. I did not mention this one in the review, but there must be an arrangement of subject, verb, and predicate. That is 1 second. A proposition is either true or false. There's a truth value in it. And it's meaningful because you can make it as a hypothesis for study. Proposition is a claim of something that can be searched of or sought of. What is a judgment? I already mentioned that. What is an evidence? I mentioned that as well. Okay, what is knowledge? It's a justified truth claim. There are three elements, so remember these three elements. And the meaning of truth is what is the case. It says it is the case. What is not the case is not the case. About absolute certitude, you can study this. There is analytically true statement when there is no possible contradiction. Synthetically true statement because it is analytic at the same time because there is no contradiction as well, like I live, I exist, I am. All this has no contradiction. Now, conditional certitude, when the condition exists, then it is always true. Okay, now do not study this because this will be next week. This is for quiz 3. We don't care about the philosophers for now. What you will care is the first part. This is for the midterm. Okay, so this first part is for the midterm review. Midterm reviewer. Okay, now this second part here, this is for quiz 3. So never mind this one. This is for quiz 3. We will do this next week. And we will study the philosophers first before we proceed on here. I think I have reviewed for you the midterm, at the same time your vocabulary. Now I want you to look at your discussion number 3. So I have 15 minutes to show you the discussion number 3. Do you have any questions so far? Now, discussion, sorry, I will go to here. So for your discussion number 3, I want you to watch a video that's very important video. And this video is about the changing view of the universe. And what is the changing view of the universe? And there is a shift from the Ptolemaic theory to Copernican theory. Now, the Ptolemaic theory is geocentric, while Copernican theory is a heliocentric. So what's the difference between these two? I will go quickly to show my camera, and I will use the board for you to give you an idea about it. Okay, so I need to use my camera right now. Okay, and I think that's it, what you see to present the discussion. So our discussion is about this is discussion number 3. All right, and the main problem that we need to look at is about truth. Okay, sometimes we will ask a question, does truth change? Okay, or sometimes we ask the question, who has the truth? Or where does the truth lie? Okay, is it on the subject or is it in the object? So what's the difference between the subject and the object? Okay, now look at the video. So there is a video about the changing view of the universe. And this is my first frame of reference, the changing view of the universe. Okay, now what happens on this view? So we start with second century AD. Okay, and we call this one 280. Okay, just say 280 approximately. Okay, because that happens around 158 AD. So say 280. And it takes, this is something like 1550 AD. And the guy here was Ptolemy. And the guy here was Copernicus. Okay? So this is the history in astronomy. When it started by Ptolemy, their view of the universe is different. It was the Earth as the center, and the sun goes around the Earth. We call this one the Earth-centered theory, or call it geocentric. So Ptolemy created a model called geocentric model. Now Copernicus, after 1500s, imagine around say 1300, 1400 years, Copernicus, through scientific investigation, because at this time there was a telescope already, and Kepler, Galileo contributed to the finding of the telescope. So they developed a new way of seeing the universe, and they discovered that the sun is the center, not the Earth, and it is the Earth and other planet revolves around the sun. We call this one the heliocentric. What's the spelling? I think it's E-I-O. Heliocentric theory. When you say heliocentric, it's the sun that is the center. Now, why it takes more than 1,000 years for the theory to change? That's the big question. Because of the medieval dogmatism. And when you say medieval dogmatism, this is the period of the church. It was the church who owns the truth. They created a dogma and say, we know the truth, we are the vehicles of the truth, just accept what we say, we must be the source of all truth. Now, since Ptolemy was the only theory at the time, even the writing of the Bible was influenced by this astronomy, or as to how do you call that? This idea of the Earth and the Sun relationship, then it influenced the dogma. The church accepted that this must be the case out there. That is the case out there. And so it takes more than 1,000 years. And Galileo was also promoting this theory, and he was even persecuted by the church during his period and said, "Do not go out, Galileo. I hold you responsible for your actions. You can be excommunicated if you continue to uh, uh, to to explain the heliocentric or the Copernican revolution." Okay, so this is the surrounding circumstances around this theory. So you watch the video and you will understand the changing view of the universe. Now, you can start answering the question in the discussion. Okay, so in the discussion, what first paragraph? Okay, what is the problem about? Okay, try to say what is the video about, the changing view of the universe. The second paragraph, I think, focuses on what are the factors that influence the geocentric theory. Why this theory was accepted for more than a 1,000 years. And I think you need to mention the problem of the dogmatism during the medieval period. It prolonged to the period until the modern period here. The third one is about the truth by Aristotle, about the case. If Aristotle would like to judge this case here, what is Aristotle's definition of truth? What is the case? You have to say it. Who do you think between Ptolemy and Copernicus was saying about the case? Who has the case? So who has the truth? Is it Ptolemy or is it Copernicus? What is the case? It must be the case. What is really the case out there? Is it the earth as the center or is it the sun is the center? So try to examine that. Using Aristotle's definition of truth, what is the case out there? And the fourth paragraph is why do we need to know the case of the object? Why do we need to know the case of the object? Can we just say the subject is in charge? Can we just say, let anyone say something about the truth? Can the person be the source of truth? So I will share again before we end. We have 6 minutes before our conclusion. Okay, I will share. All right. Now I will go to here. So you have the paragraphs to develop. Okay, so I will copy this and I will paste this one. All right, so the first paragraph is try to summarize, okay? Write a summary of the video. That's very important. And answer the question, okay? Answer the question, what contributed to the shift? What is the major factor that influenced the shift? All right? So try to answer these questions. What contributed to the shift from Ptolemaic theory to Copernican revolution? And then what is the major factor that influenced here? As I mentioned earlier, is the presence of a telescope. During the time of Ptolemy, they just used the naked eye to understand reality, while using instrument is better way than the one by by Ptolemy. So try to compare Ptolemy's time using what? The naked eye to know the truth. Okay. During the time of Copernicus, okay, so this time they use what? Technology. Example of that is a telescope to find the truth. So if you are to make judgment which one is reliable, okay, which one is reliable? Which one is reliable? Can you rely on your eyes? Okay. Or can you rely on technology? It's very important dilemma in finding the truth. Now, in number 2, try to study the role of the church. Okay, try to review the role of the church in keeping the Ptolemaic theory for almost 1500 years. Why? Why? So we have the medieval dogmatism, which is very crucial, and the authority and the dogmas of the church. Okay, that is very important in terms of the control at the time. So there is the role of the church, which is important. For number 3, I need you to develop a paragraph on truth by Aristotle. Okay, what is truth by Aristotle? Okay, so what is the case out there? Which one is the center? Is it the earth? Or is it the sun? So who has the truth then? Okay, so that's very important. You have to make a statement that affirms or deny what is there. Now, paragraph number 4, why need to know the source of truth? And what is the source of truth? Is it the object or is it the subject? Who has the truth? Can we rely on the subject? Okay? Is the truth, okay, found in the subject? Now, if it is, can the subject be in charge? Okay? Or do we need to go back to the object to find the truth? Why? So try to answer. If you can answer for paragraph number 4, then you will be able to answer our discussion post. Now, once you have done this posting, then try to publish this by day 5 for this week, and then you try to do replies by day 7. So posting is by day 5, replies by day 7. I think we finished our today's discussion. Thank you so much, Kiana, for being in the class until the end. So this is a recorded class for your classmates to also see. Thank you so much. See you next week. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.